Hello everyone, we have to discuss about that main for writing bubble preparation. As we told Question number 8. Distinguish between the gender equalities and gender and the equalities and women empowerment. Why is it important to take the genders and the concern into the account to in programs and design and implementations? 10 minutes. Core demands of the question. The distinguish between the gender equality. The distinguish between the gender equalities and genders equalities and the women empowerment. Explain the importance of taking the gender concern into the account in the programs and design and implementations. Suggested other sustainable way forward. Answer. Gender equalities and the women's and empowerment are the interconnected concept that aims to the address the social, economically and the political disparities and faced by the women. And while the gender equalities ensures that the everyone has the same rights and opportunities, and gender equalities and focus on the welfares and the justice in the treatment, women empowerment on the others hand is the about and the providing women's and with the justice in treatment, women empowerment on the other hand is about providing the women and with the tools and the resources to make the independence discipline and lead the fulfilling sleeps. Different between genders equalities and the woman empowerment. Genders equalities and the gender equalities refers to the ensuring that the individuals and of all the genders have the equal rights and responsibilities and opportunities. It is the eliminated legals and the systematically discrimination based on the genders. For instance, the Constitution of India guarantees and equal rights and for all the cities and regardless of gender, promoting equal access to educations and jobs and property. Genders equalities involved. अरे राम रे involve giving pupils and fairs and treatment and based on their the specific need and situations, recognizing historical and social disadvantagement and faced by the women, and for instance initiatives and like the Beti Bachao Beti Padhao provided the extra supports to girls in India to the correct genders and the imbalance in education and healthcare. Women empowerment means giving women and the women's the abilities to make the independent decisions and access the resources that the enables them to live the fulfilling lives. For the instance and programs and like the self-help groups and SHGs in the rural India's empowered and women's instant economically and the socially providing theme with financially independence and the leadership's opportunities. Importance of taking gender concern into the account in program design and implementations. Addressing historicals and disparities and gender sensitive and programs help to the rectified historical gender imbalanced, ensuring that the women receive and the necessary supports to catch and up in the areas and where been they have been traditionally and marginalized. For the examples, the National Rural Livelihood Missions and NRLM focus on the empowering rural women by the providing financial and skills building support, economically growth development, genders equalities and promotes the including in economic growth and via the trappings into the full and potential of the population. For example, according to the MC and the Global Institutes and India's GDP and could increase by the 770 billions by the 2025 with empowered genders and parities in the workforce and better the health outcomes and programs that the incorporated gender the considers. कौन चला रहा हो जो India's GDP could increase by the 717 billions by the 2025 with improve the genders and parities in the workforces, better health outcomes. Programs that the incorporated gender considerations result in improvement health outcome for the woman, particularly in the materials and reductive health. For example, the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojanas and supports the pregnant women and the nursing mothers with the financial incentives and for better nutrition and health cares. Politically representations and policy inclusively and the 33% reservations of women in the parliament through the Women Reservation Act of 2023 and bill ensure that the powers and perspectives and are the includes and creating the gender sensitivity sensitives and policies. For example, increase the females and representations in local the governance such as the under the Panchayati Raj Act has led and to other stronger focus on the women's centric issues like the sanitation, healthcare, and education, benefiting the communities. Improve social and the indicators and gender the focus interventions contribute to the improvement in literacy and rates education and social status for women. For example, the Kasturba's, Gandhis, and Balika and Vidyalaya and scheme provided the residential schools for the girls and from the marginalized and communities, helping to improve their the educational outcomes. Include policies and making the taking genders into the account ensured that the women's and voices are the included to decisions making and process leading to more and the inclusive and equitable and policies. And for example, the Mahila Shakti Kendra and programs and promotes the communities and participations by the empowering women to take part in local government. Reduced and the gender based violence gender and the sensitive and programs and can help the reduce and the instandard of gender based violence and by the promoting the awareness and legal protections. For example, India one stop centers schemes provided the initiatives for medicals legals and physiological supports to women facing the violence. Sustainable development goals, genders equalities is the key component of the sustainable development goals SDG and the integrated genders concern in the program. Ensure eligibility and with the global and development prosperities. For the instant, SDGs 5 focus on achieving the gender equalities and empowering all the women and girls by the 2030 and various Indian policies contribute towards this goal. Way forward. Strengthening legal framework, enhancing and implementing gender sensitive laws and that the protect women rights and promotes and the equalities is essential. For example, expanding the maternity benefits act 1961 to cover more the informal sectors workers and would ensure the borders protections for the working women, promoting women's leaderships, encouraging more women to take up the leadership positions in politics and the business and the governance can drive the social and economically change. For example, the Women's Reservation Act 2023, which the 6 to the reserve 33% of the seat in parliament and for the women's bill for the women's for women will ensure the creators political representation, boosting the financial institution inclusion, expanding women's access to financial services such as loans and the savings is crucial for their the economic development. For example, the Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana and has the enabled over the 200 billion women to open bank account, improving financial independence, investing in educations and skills development, focus on educations and skill development for the women and especially in STEM field and can open new the careers opportunities. For examples, the National Skills Development Corporation NSDC offers the specialized skill training programs for the women, ensuring equipping them for better employment. Better employment prospects and expanding the support for the marginalized women, ensuring that the programs targeted the most vulnerable groups such as the rural women and women with the disabilities is the critical for the inclusively. For examples, the National Rural Livelihood Mission NRLM providing rural women with the opportunities for entrepreneurships and self-employment. Genders qualities and the women's empowerment are critical to achieve a just and inclusively society. By integrating genders concern into the program design and implementing be ensures fair opportunities for women to contribute to the social, economics, and the political life and prioritizing genders in the policy makings not only the enhances development outcomes but also the poster a more and the equitable and sustainable future for all. Question number 9. Intercaste marriages between the caste and width have the socio-economic parities have the increased to some the extent, and what this is less true of interreligious marriages. Discuss. Core demand of the question: discuss why the intercaste marriages between the caste and which has socio-economically parities has the increased, highlighted why the interreligious have not increased the despires and having the socio-economically parities. Enumerates and government and the social supports initiative promoting the inter and the caste and interreligious marriages. Answer: intercaste marriages occurs the between the individuals and from the in different from different caste and within the same religions, and while the inter and the religious marriages happen the between individuals of the different religions, while both type of the unions banks and traditional societal norms and there the dynamics differs according to the National Family Health and Survey. Only 2.1% of marriages in India are the interreligions, while the 10% are the intercaste, and this show the disparities in the acceptance and growth of thus union and with the intercaste marriages and being the relatively and more common. Reasons for the increase in the intercaste marriages between the casteless castes with socio and the economic parities. Different caste together, especially and those with the similar economic backgrounded and leading to more the intercaste marriages. Economic independence, financial independence, particularly among women, has led to a rise in marriages based on the personals and choice rather than the caste consolidations, changing social norms over time. Societal views on caste having becomes the more flexible and especially among the younger and generations, allowing marriages within the socials economically similar and caste economic parities as other bridge and brand to the individuals from the different castes share other similars and the socio-economically status caste barriers often the demonized and making the marriages more as a more acceptable, and government incentives and government schemes promoting the intercaste marriages and have the contributed to and the increase in the such unions. For instance, the Dr. Ambedkar schemes for the social integration through the intercaste marriages offers financial incentives and for the intercaste marriages. greater exposures and through the workplaces, the modern workplaces, and bring the individuals and forms the different greater exposures through workplaces, the modern and workplaces bringing the individuals from the different caste and together, allowing pupils to form the relationship based on shares the professionals interested in. For instance, and inter caste marriages among IT professionals and helps the increased and due to the work environment. Decline of caste based and the occupations, the traditions. Links and between the caste and the occupations has the weakened and the leadings to greater social mobility and the acceptance of intercaste marriages among the economically similar caste. For example, agricultural and community has that once and the adhered to the strict caste lines and now the increasingly accept and intercaste marriages and the economically role diversify reasons for the lower prevalence of the interreligion marriages. Strong religious identified and remain other strong cultures markers, and many families prioritize and maintaining their the religious traditions, discouraging interreligious marriages. Community pressures social and the family and the pressures and often the daters and interreligious marriages as the community fears loss of the religious and tradition and identity, legal and complexities, legal challenges around the inter and religious marriages, including issues related to the religious conversations, inheritance, and the child rights, and makes us the unions most the difficult to navigate. For instance, the Special Marriage Act 1954 allow enters the religious marriages and but the legal and the social challenges still discourage and many the couples from pursuing this the options and religious law and conversations religious laws and often the required one partners to the converts to the others and religious before the marriage and creating the barriers to the inter-religious unions. Cultural differences despite socio-economically parities and cultural practices between the different religions such as the wedding rituals and family roles and often the discourage marriages and across the religious lines and fears of the social and the ostracism and couples in the inter religious marriages often face the threat of social and the ostracism from their the communities and which the discourage and many from the considerings and such the unions and central and the social supports initiative promoting intercaste and interreligious marriages. Dr. Ambedkar schemes for the intercaste marriages and this government initiative offers financial incentives to couples where one the partners belongs to other schedules caste and the others does not. For example, couples and marriings under this the schemes receives up to the 2.5 lakhs as other rewards for the promoting social integrations. Social Marriages Act 1954 and this law provides a legal frameworks for the inter-religious and inter-caste marriages offering the couples protections from the religious laws. Social awareness compositions various NGOs and social activities promotes the awareness and acceptance of intercastes and interreligious marriages through the composition. Safe houses for couples and state government provides safe houses for couples and who face the violence or the threats due to their the choice to marry the outside their the caste or religious promotions of legal literacy and government and NGOs works to the improve legal literacy among couples and ensuring they are the aware of their the rights under the Special Marriage Act 1954 and other the protective laws. For examples, the legal awareness and camps organized by the human rights law networks help couples and understand there's the rights to marry freely while intercaste marriages and have the increase especially among the castes and with the socio-economically parities. Inter-religious marriages remains less the common due to the stronger religions and cultural barriers while the addressing ways thus barriers and through the legal protections awareness programs and the social supportings. India can the further promote social harmonies and inclusively and creating other society and whereas the individuals can marry based on personal choice and rather than the societal expectations. In dealing with the socio-economically issues of the developments and what kinds of the collaborations and between the governments and NGOs and private sectors and would be the most productive core demands of the question. Discuss the major and the socio economically issues of development, examines and what kind of the collaboration between the government, NGOs and the private sectors and would be the most and the productive and in the decline and the with and the socio economically issues of the developing. Socio-economically issues like the poverty, inequality, and the unemployment remain the significant barriers to the development in India, despite the programs in certain sectors addressing thus the issues and required other multiple faceted and approach the involving the government, NGOs, and private sectors, each entity and bringing the unique strength from the policy formulations to grassroots and executions and making the collaboration essential for the sustainable and inclusive development. Major socio-economically issues of development poverty and inequalities despite and India's economic growth and poverty and inequality and the persist with wealth concentrated in the hand of other few. For example, according to the of FAM's 2023 report, in India's the richest 5% controls over 60% of the countries and wealth the significantly widens the inequalities gaps. Education access to the education access to qualities education is still the limited and particularly in rural areas and leading to the low literacy rates and inequalities skill development. For example, the annual status of education report asars and 2023 and found that in the rural areas only 25% of the youth can read class second and level the 10 text in their the regional language and healthcare. India faces significant healthcare challenges, including the high materials and infect and the mortality rates and the limited access to healthcare services in rural areas. For example, as per as the National Samples Registrations Survey data, India and maternal mortality rates was 90 per and the 1,001 lakhs and leave birth in 2018 and 2020, showing the need for the better healthcare access. Unemployment, both unemployment and underdevelopments, and remains the presence and concern with youth and rural workers, and particularly affected by the structural unemployment. For example, according to the annual PLFS reports, the estimated unemployment rate you are on the usual status for persons of age 15 years and above for the 2022 and 23 and was 3.2%. Housing and infrastructure's rapid urbanizations has led to the slums and proliferations and in decades housing, especially in the major cities like the Mumbai and Delhi. For examples, over 40% of the Mumbai's and population lives in the slums, so casting the need for the better urban plannings and infrastructures. Gender equalities, gender disparities in pays and the access to opportunities continue to the hinders women's empowerment and economic growth. For example, India ranks 129th out of the 146 countries in the Global Gender Gap Report 2024, highlighting significant gender disparities and social security limits and access to the pensions and social security benefits for the informal sectors workers. The elderly is the growing concern. For example, less than 10% of the India and workforces in the formal sectors has the access to social security benefits, leaving the millions and vulnerable. Productive and collaboration between the government and NGOs and the private sector in dealing with the socio-economically issues and resources poolings, the combinings and financial, humans and technological resources from all the sectors is essential to address socio-economic challenges and comprehensively. For example, the PM Awas Yojana and pulls government fundings with private sector expertising and the NGOs of outreach and to provide the housing for the underprivileged. Public private partnerships PPP and collaborating through the PPP models and enhances the innovations and efficiency in large scale public programs. For example, the Ayushman Bharat schemes and works and with the private hospitals and to the delivers and affordables and healthcare services across India's and capacities building empowering locals, the governments and NGOs by the providing trainings and resources ensures the sustainability and effectiveness of programs. For example, the Pradhan Mantri Kaushal Vikas Yojanas and partners with NGOs and business to enhance skills development and employability amongst youth. Institutionalized relationships established formal frameworks for collaborations between the government and NGOs ensure sustained and impact on the ground. For example, the Manrega's 2005 institutionalized NGOs collaborations to ensure effective rural employments. Technology transfer and innovations, the private sectors and can introduce the technological solutions. And while the government and NGOs facilitate their the adaptations and aid the grassroots levels, while the government and NGOs facilities their the adaptations aid the grassroots levels, and for example, the Digital India's initiatives leverages partnerships and with the private tax and companies like the Googles and to brings the internet access to the rural areas and monitoring and the accountabilities jointly design and monitoring systems between the government. For example, the Swachh Bharat Mission and the integrated and NGOs and participations in the monitoring sanitations and infrastructures to ensure local accountability, addressing socio-economic issues and the request. The collaboratives and approach where the government, private sectors and NGOs works in the synergies and to the leverages their the respectives strength through the public-private partnerships and technological innovation and strengthens strategic CSR involvement and sustainable and situations can be the achieved the combined and effort of all the stakeholders can ensure that the India development is both the inclusive and the equitable meetings the diverse needs of its population. Question number 11. Through the greats and cholas are numbers and more the eight theirs the name is still remembers with the great pride because of their the highest and achievement in the domain of arts and architecture's comments. Co-demands of the questions. Discuss the contributions of the Cholas in domains of arts. Ensure enumerated the contributions of the Cholas in the domain of architectures. The Cholas dynasty 9th to 13th century BCE, one of the most powerful South Indian empire, is the renewed and for its outstanding contributions to the arts and the architectures. There the regime mark are the golden eras and blending the religious cultures and the craftsmanships into the monumentums and structure and the increased inscriptions through the Cholas have faded from history, and there the legacy in arts and the architecture continue to be the remembered with the great pride and symbolized the zenith of the Dravidian arts and contribution of the Cholas in the domain of the art and exquisites and bronze sculptures, the Cholas perceptions, the arts of the bronze and casting producing highly the detailed and the culturals and the sculptures particularly of deities. For example, the iconics and the Nataraja's sculptures represents and the Shivas in his the cosmics and dance and is the globally globally recognized for its the depictions of motion and balance, realistic depictions of human forms. Chola's artisans and were the known for their realistic and the portrayals of the human figures and capturing both the physicals and beauty and the emotion expressions. For example, the bronze figures of the Sambandar and the child sant is the testament to the release and the grass in Chola art. Religious symbolized Chola art was the deeply religious symbolic Chola arts and was the deeply intertwined and with the religious themes and the portrayage complex symbolized in there the sculpture. For example, the Ardha Narishwara sculptures and this the depict and Shiv and as the half males and the half females and mobile and symbolized the unity of the oppositions and advanced metals craftsmanship. The Cholas and masters the metalworking techniques providings finally detailed religious and secular figures. For example, the bronze figures of the Parvatis and Vishnus highlighted the artist and skills in presenting the intricate detailed like the garments and jewelries. Temple architecture on the Cholas temples are the adorned and with magnificent sculptures that the portray scenes and from the mythologies and religious epics. For example, the Brihadeshwara's temples in the Tanjavur features and numerous and intricate and carvings of goats and dancer and animals, influences of dance and the iconography. And Cholas are the influences classicals and Indians and dances forms, particularly the through and there the depictions of the Devin and dancer. For the example, the Natarajas in the Ananda and Tandavas and pose the improvised and the traditionals and Bharatnatyams and dance forms and the methodologicals and the narratives in arts. Cholas are the frequently and depictions schemes from the methodological text, helping to present and the propagates religious stories through the visuals art. And for the example, sculptures and from the era Vateshwara's temples at the Dharashuram and shows the schemes forms the leaves of sant and deities. Contribution of the Cholas in domain of architecture. Dravidian temple architecture. The Cholas performed the Dravidian styles of temple architecture characteristic via the towerings, bimans and ground and gopurams. For example, the Brihadeshwara's temples in the Tanjavur is the masterpiece of Chola temples architecture, standing as one of the India's largest and temples introduced of the Bimanas. And the Cholas introduced Bimanas temple towers and that the becomes and the iconic features of South Indian temples. For example, the Gangaikonda Cholapuram temple is famous for its the lower tower Vimana symbolized the grandeur of the Chola architecture. Monumental scales, the Chola temple are shown, and for there the massive scales and advanced and engineering techniques, especially in the constructions of nomoliths. For examples, the granites and monolith of the Nandi and the Brihadeshwara's temples weighs on over 20 tons and is in the engineering marvels. Use of the stones and bricks. The Cholas involved by the using both the stones and bricks in temples constructions, allowing for more elaborate design and stronger structures. For example, the Ayurvedeswaras and temples at the Darasurams and is other prime examples of their use of both material to create the intricates and design. Architectural influences beyond India's Chola architecture extended its the influence beyond India, particularly in the Southeast Asia. For example, the temple of the Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Angkor Wat in Cambodia exhibited features and reminiscent of Chola architecture style and reflects their global influences, water and the engineering in the temple complexes. The Cholas incorporations and water management. The system like the temples and tasks and the reservoirs and into there's the temples and complex. For example, the push, Karinis and temple task. It the Ganga Konda Cholapurams and were the essentials for the ritual and purifications and water conservations and foundation for the later dynasties and the Chola architecture's style laid the foundation for the later South Indian dynasties, particularly the Vijayanagaras and empires and which the continued and expanded on the Chola architecture innovations. For example, the Vijayanagaras temples with their the large and the gopurams and were the inspired by the Chola temples architecture. The Cholas through theirs the imperial contributions to the arts and architecture left other legacy that the continued to inspired and admirations there's the innovations in bronze sculptures, religious iconography and monumentums, temples architecture elevated the Dravidian styles too. Its peak influences the future generation, although the Cholas empires and has the faded there the artistic achievement and remains the immortals and showcasing the artistics and architectural brilliances of medieval South India. Question number 12. How far is it correct and to say and that the First World Wars and was found essential for the preservation of balance of power? Core demands of the question examines the arguments in favor of the view and that the First World War and was the primarily fought to the maintenance the balance of power. Discuss others and factors responsible for the First World War. First World War 1914-1918 was other devastating and global conflict involving major powers grouped and into the triples and entente. Britain, France, Russia and the Triples Alliance, Germany, Australia, Hungary, Italy. It was marked and by the complex interplay of alliances and rivalries and the militarism, while often considered and the bar for the balance of power. Other the factors like the nationalism, imperialism and the economic tensions also the contributed and the war and recept global politics and leading to the eventual downfalls and of empires. Argument supporting the views and that the First World War was found for balance of power. Alliance was other tool of balance. Alliances were the strategically formed and to the counter balance opposing powers and maintain the equilibriums in Europe. For example, Germany formed and the Triple Alliances to balance the growing influences of Russia and France in Europe. Germany rise and Europeans response. Germany rapid industrial and military expansions challenged British naval and supremacy, sparking tensions across Europe. For example, Germany naval expansions was the perceived as other direct and threat to the Britain's global naval dominance. Colonial rivalries and European power competed fiercely for the colonials and the territories and further the straining relations and the threatenings the delicate balance of power. For example, the Moroccans crisis 1905-1911 and so the clashes and between the France and the Germany over control of the Africans colonies, Austro-Hungarians and the Russians and rivalries in the Balkans, the Falkans regions becomes other flashpoint where Austro-Hungary and the Russias competed and for the influences leading to the escalated tensions. For example, the Bosnians and crises of the 1908 and wars the Austria annexes and Bosnia's engaged both the Russias and the Serbias and the decentralize the regions. France and desires for the revenge and France showed the alliances with the Russias and Britons to counterbalance and Germany growing the powers and driven by other desire to reclaim lost territories and from the Franco and the Prussian wars. For example, France was the motivated by its the defeats in the 1871 and showed to the Czech Germany rise and through the alliance preservation of empires and many the powers and especially the Britain and entire the war to the protected theirs the empires and the prevent any the single and countries particularly Germany from the dominating Europe. For example, the Britons and entered the bar to prevent Germany dominances in Europe and with the threatened British empires interested European power dynamics and the intrigue wave of European power dynamics means and that any the significant shifts could lead to the imbalance, making the war an effort to maintain the stability. For example, the triple entente and triple alliances were the essential tools to the prevent any one countries from the achieving hegemonics and powers. Other factor responsible for the First World War and nationalism and the fair wars, particularly in the Balkans, lead and to the political instabilities and culminating in the assassinations that the triggered the war. For example, the assassination of the Archduke and France and Ferdinand and by other Serbian nationalists was other direct consequences of nationalist tensions. Imperialism, the desire for the colonial expansions intensified and rivalries amongst European powers excavating and tensions that the contributed to the war. For example, the scrambles for the Africa brought the Germany into the conflict and with the Britons and France over the colonial ambitions and militarians, the aggressives and military build up and bar and plans like the Germany and the Schlieffen plans reflected the growing influence of militarians in shaping the foreign policy. For example, the Schlieffen plans was the design and for other repeat military and victories highlighting the role of militarian in the war. Economic and the rivalries and Germany's industrial rise. After 1871 challenges and Britain's the economic dominance and the intensified and tension as the countries viewed for the global market control. For example, German growing the industrial power and threatened British trade and the economic hegemony, is, escalating and the rivalries. Futures of diplomacy and diplomatics and efforts to the prevent war and failed as the secrets treaties and the alliances dependent mistrust and the escalate confrontations. For examples, the Franco and the Russians alliance of the 1894 was the secret agreement and that the raised and suspensions and the his hostilities and across the Europe of the public opinions, nationalist propagandas and fervent public opinions in the countries like France and Germany and fluid the support for the aggressive policies pushing the leading leaders towards war. For example, the nationalists and the rhetorics and the public praisers in the France demanded and revenge against the Germany for the Francois and the Prussians wars. Technological advancement knew the technology in war, the including the advanced and weaponries, and made the military leaders and more the confidence in theirs the ability to win the conflict and quickly the contribution to the outbreaks of war. For example, the introduction of the machine guns and tanks and the aircraft changes the names the natures of war, making it the more and destructive. While the First World War was fought to the mention the balance of power, it was also the influenced by the others and significant factors like the nationalism, imperialism, and the economic rivalries. The futures of the diplomacy and militarians placed by roles in the driving Europe into other globals and conflict. The war not only the reshaped the political landscapes and but also the marked the end of the several empires fundamentally and the phase altering the courses of 20th century. Question number 13. How was the industrial revolutions in England and the responsible for the decline and handicraft and cottage industries in India? Core demands of the question. Discuss how the industrial revolutions in England was the responsible for the declines of the handicraft and the cottage industries in India. Enumerate other the factor responsible for the declines of handicraft and cottage industries in India. Answer. The industrial revolution in England, which begins in the late 18th century and revolutionaries global trade and manufacturing, whilst it is the spuried and unpredicted and economically growth in Britain. It led to the declines of the handicraft and cottage industries in India. Machines made the British goods and flooded Indians market and displacing traditional industries that had the once and the thrived, combined and with the explorative British trade policies. British trade policies and there the changes and resulting in the widespread industrializations and economic hard and shifts for the Indian artisans. The industrial revolutions in the England was the responsible for the declines of the handicraft and cottage industries in India. Introduction of the machine made goods, the advance of the machine made textiles in England drastically reduced the cost of the productions and leadings to the replacements of Indian handmade goods. For examples, why the 1813 principles cotton textiles flooded and Indians market causing the collapse of the India cottage weavings industries declines in the exports of Indian textiles exports the once and highly the sage after in Europe and the plummeted but to the competitives Shiran from the British machine and made the textiles. For examples, the collapse of the Bengal Muslims industries now for its the fine fabric symbolize the decline of the Indian export Imposition of heavy tariff on Indian goods. British policies imposed high the tariff on the Indian textile, making it is the impossible for Indian goods to compete in the global market. For example, Indian cotton's textile faces the tariff as high as the 70 and 18%, limiting their exports potentials, while the British goods and faced no such the restrictions and shift to the raw materials exports. India was transformed into other suppliers of raw materials and the primarily cottons for the British factories, undermining local industries. For example, during the mid 19th centuries, and India raw cottons exports increased by over 300%, and while the local and weavers struggled and due to the rising raw materials prices. Technological disparities. India's cottage industrial industries and relevant on the handlooms couldn't compete with the advanced and machineries used in British factories. For example, while British powers and looms produce textiles rapidly, Indians and the handlooms remains the labors and intensive, making locals the product and uncompetitive. And British colonial policies. The British and East India Company and monopolistic policies and heavy the taxations further the crippled India's and handicraft sectors. For example, the East India Company and levies high taxes on the artisans and the particularly in Bengal, making it the difficult for themes to the sustain their the business. Other factor responsible for the declines of handicraft and cottage industries in India. Colonial revenue systems. The British imposed land revenue system forced many the artisans to the blenders there's the craft and due to high taxes. For example, the permanent settlement in Bengal imposed high land taxes, punished weaverings to the vendors. There's the trade and engage in agriculture, railways and transportations. The expansions of railways and made it the easier for British goods to the penetrate rural markets and displacing the local handicraft. For example, by the 1853 and British goods and reached and even the most and remote villages, leading to other declines in the demand for local craft and famine and economic strength frequent and the famines and during the British rules and weekends and local the industrials by the impoverizing artisans communities. For examples, the great famines of the 1876 and 78 in Madras and Bombay led to the widespread and displacement of the weavers and artisans, further and crippling the industry. Declines on patronage systems, collapse of the traditional patronage from the local king and zamindars leads to other decreased in the demand for the luxuries handicraft. For examples, the decline of the Mughal and patronage resulted into the reduced the demand for fine and the embroidery and the luxurious textiles, shift in the customers and the preferences as the British made goods becomes the chapter cheaper and the widely and available. Indian the consumers shifted their the references, reducing demand for the locally and made and the products and for examples British made and clothing becomes increasingly popular, reducing demand for the traditional Indian textiles like the chanderi and the Vanarasi silk. Based of the industrial protections policies, unlike the European countries like the Germany and the US, India's had no the protectionism and policies to the safeguard it is the domestic industries. For instance, India lacked protectionism and tariff that could have sealed local industrials from the foreign or competitions. The Industrial Revolution in England was the primary factor in the declines of India handicraft and the cottage industries, but it was the compounded by the colonial policies, famines, and economic exploitations. As the British industrials thrived, India artisans and communities collapsed and transforming the subcontinent and into other superiors of raw materials for the British factories. This led to the severe socio-economics and consequences, eroding India traditional and the industries base and empowering the millions. Question number 14.